2 weeks ago, we got a rather interesting episode of the Tithes called Harvest. An incredible episode that featured Psychers, the Adeptus Arbites, the first female custodian on screen, and a Sister of Silence. And as much as I want to see that story continued, the Tithes is an anthology, so we have to move on. This week's episode is the last one, number 3, and it's titled Bullets. If you've been waiting for some heavy guard action in the nitty-gritty of the Warhammer universe, this episode is for you. And the theme of these Tithes episode has been a really interesting twist at the end, so I'm excited to discuss that with you all. Let's get into it.
There is no peace amongst the stars, for in the grim, dark future, there is only war.
Logistics is what, for the most part, wins wars. Even in a universe as vast and complex as the Warhammer 40k one, that truth still remains. I mean, look at the poster boy of 40k, Robute Gilliman. His Primarch power is organization and logistics. I somewhat kid, it is more than that, but you see the point. In this week's episode, and the last episode of the Tithes, logistics is the name of the game. This episode starts in space above the planet of Diomedon 2. This planet has been at war with the orcs for months, and as such, they are basically out of ammunition and supplies. However, the Imperial Navy ship, the Chalice of Hope, has arrived and is sending down a group of Kasserkin along with a Commissar with several bulk carriers. Generally, these landers are used to ferry men and material from the planet's surface into orbit. As this squadron of landers enters into the atmosphere of the planet, you see the devastation that's been wrought by this war. The Cadian 506 have been posted on this planet and have been fighting alongside the planetary defense forces for the entire time. But there was no way that this convoy of supposed much-needed supplies was going to make it down to the ground unscathed. Orc flyboys come screaming out of the sky, shooting at anything that they can see. The orcs on the ground have spotted this aerial Imperial convoy and know that there's something going on. They might not be the brightest of Xenos, but they can determine what looks like a good prize. As much damage as the flyboys caused, and they did bring down one of the landers, the Imperial Navy pilots are very well trained and dutiful till death. Through their sacrifice, they're able to destroy the orc flyboys and get the landers down to safety. The group of Cadian Kasserkin led by Sergeant Pia Anouk and Commissar Brock meet with the Cadians on the ground. The relief on these Cadians is palpable, and they explain that they are basically out of ammunition. Their flak guns are dry, and they only really have heavy small arms. And this is where we really get our first twist. Sergeant Pia orders the landers to open their cargo bays, and they are stark empty. Sergeant Pia turns to the Cadian in charge of Diomedon 2 and explains to him that there is a tithe due. Even in the midst of a war, the Imperium needs its material where it wants it. Instead of bringing a much-needed resupply to this beleaguered planet, they are taking every piece of ammunition that's left on the planet to somewhere else. Understandably, the Cadian colonel, I believe he's a colonel, is upset. But some strong words from Commissar Brock and a reminder that the Imperium does not do well with traitors is enough to get them to comply. There's also a small moment where Commissar Brock decides that he is going to make his last stand of his career on this planet with these people. Ammunition from every front of the war starts to pour into this landing pad, and they start loading it onto the landers. And this is just in time for the first scouting party of the orcs to attack. This is an incredibly fraught battle, as every single bullet that's used counts. Soon, the Cadians and Commissar Brock only have their melee weapons to defend themselves against the orcs. But for a highly trained Scala Progenium graduated Commissar of the Imperium, this is easy work. Back on the actual front lines of this war, Lieutenant Namlu, who is the Cadian we saw at the beginning of the episode, is given her orders to give up all ammunition. She tells her soldiers to grab their melee weapons and they head out to the trenches. As far as the eye can see, there are orcs and orc war machinery. Right when this ammunition was needed, it was taken away, and this is the last we ever see of Lieutenant Namlu and the Cadian 506th. Sometime later, the Chalice of Hope finally makes it to its Munitorum Depot destination. Munitorum depots are where vast amounts of the Imperium's materiel are kept and distributed. Sergeant Pia and her remaining force take down the ammunition that they took from Diomedon 2 and bring it to the Administratum. They hand over the data slates and the cargo manifest, but there seems to be something wrong. The Administratum clerk thanks them for the delivery and expects more next time. But before they go, they express that the area that this ammunition is going to be kept in can no longer hold the weight of it. There's simply too much material in this one depot. So instead of maybe sending it back to Diomedon or another planet that might really need it, they order it to be destroyed. If there's one thing that we know about the Administratum, it's that they will follow their orders to the T. Even with the sacrifice of Brutus in the first episode and the ruthlessness of Tirith in the second, this episode was probably the most gut-wrenching. It is one of the more pure depictions of Imperial bureaucracy and its effects that I have ever seen. When you have an empire as large as the Imperium that is consistently at lore, it is incredibly difficult to get the supplies where it needs to go. Even with the billions of people that work for the Administratum and the Departmentum Unitorum, it's almost impossible to get things exactly right. And when you add something like the Imperial Tithe into that equation, it can get even more complicated. It was such a difficult, visceral, and demoralizing thing to have to do that only a religious fervor and duty to the Emperor made them follow the orders. That and the fear of a commissar's bolt pistol. I thought this episode was overall fantastic. I might even put it on the same level as the second episode, Harvest. Warhammer TV is really starting to excel at making you care about characters in a very short amount of time. I think by the end of that episode, everyone was really feeling for Sergeant Pia Anook. Impossible decisions to make, all for it not to mean anything in the end. And I was even surprised that the Commissar got some character development. Brock told us and Pia that he had killed 50 of his own soldiers. Not Xenos, not heretics, but 50 loyal soldiers because they were scared or angry or lost. After a while, even through the conditioning that they've had at the Scala Progenium, that can weigh on a Commissar. My only qualm about this episode, and it's a small thing, is that we didn't get to see more of the dogfighting between the Imperial Navy pilots and the Flyboys. I'm normally not really a person who enjoys the kind of aerial combat in movies, but there's something about when Warhammer does it that I love. These real boxy planes that look like they wouldn't even fly during World War II, dueling it out across the galaxy is very funny to me. So I would have liked to see some more of that, but that's about it. Alright my friends, that is going to about do it for today's episode. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave any questions you might have in the comments below. Leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all in the next one.